Hey everyone. Ever catch yourself thinking about, what comes after all this? Like the ultimate fate of everything.
I think it's a pretty universal question. Humans have always been fascinated by endings and beginnings.
Right. And this time we wanted to deep dive into that whole new heaven and new earth thing from the Bible.
Ah, yes. The Book of Revelation. Vivid stuff.
Seriously. We've got some excerpts to work with, and I gotta say, some of the imagery is pretty wild.
It certainly is. We're zeroing in on the last two chapters, 21 and 22.
Okay, so why those specifically?
Well, they're kind of a big deal across a lot of different faiths, even for people who aren't particularly religious. It's this peek into what might exist after everything as we know it wraps up.
Like end of the world kind of stuff.
Well, end of the world as we know it, more like a total transformation.
Okay, that's different. So there's this one line that really struck me. It talks about God wiping away every tear.
Mm-hmm. Powerful imagery.
Is it just about, like, feeling better? Or is something deeper going on?
Oh, it's definitely not just a mood boost. You got to look at the context. This happens after the old heaven and earth are gone. It's not fixing up what we've got. It's a whole new reality. No more death, no more mourning, no more crying, and no more pain.
Whoa, no more pain at all. That's a pretty huge claim. Kind of hard to wrap your head around. It makes you think about how we deal with suffering now. Like, if we know this promise is out there, does it make us more compassionate, or do we just become complacent?
That is a question worth pondering. If we think, well, it'll all work out eventually anyway, and that makes us indifferent to suffering now, then I think we've missed the point. But if this promise actually fuels us to do something about suffering now,
Yeah, like we're supposed to be God's hands and feet bringing comfort in the meantime.
exactly, that's how we start to grasp the real power of what this vision is getting at.
Okay, that's deep. But then we get to the description of the New Jerusalem. It's like streets of gold, gates always open, shining like some crazy jewel.
It's quite a visual, isn't it?
Almost comical how extravagant it is. Is it really all about that bling, though?
That's where the symbolism comes in. It's not about literal wealth. It's about constant access to God. And what's interesting is that there's no temple,
No temple. Well, so no church building?
not in the traditional sense, because God is the temple, meaning his presence is everywhere.
So the whole city, I.S. the encounter with God, that really changes how we usually think about religion.
It does. Think about the most peaceful place you know. Now amplify that infinitely. Add perfect love and security.
Whoa! Okay, I'm getting chills. But then there's this thing about a Lamb's Book of Life and whose names are written in it.
Question of judgment, yes.
Right. It's often a sticking point for people. What's the deal with who gets in and who doesn't?
Well, the text doesn't give us a super clear-cut answer,
Mm.
but it does say that nothing impure or deceitful gets into the city.
So does that mean the choices we're making now affect where we end up?
It raises some tough questions about that, for sure.
Interesting. It's like even in this perfect place, there's still an emphasis on morality. Which makes me wonder, if everyone there's supposed to be good, do we lose, like, our individuality, our unique personalities?
That's a fascinating thought. It challenges us to think about what truly makes us us. Is it our flaws or something deeper? Maybe this transformation isn't at becoming uniform, but about our true selves being fully realized.
In the presence of God.
Exactly.
That's a whole new way to look at it. But wait, there's this river of life thing too that sounds incredible. Flowing from God's throne, a tree with healing leaves for every nation. It's like paradise, straight out of a fantasy novel.
Revelation is full of these rich symbols, and the river of life definitely evokes this sense of abundance, constant renewal.
Like the Garden of Eden.
It calls to mind that, yes, but with a crucial difference. This isn't just about sustenance, it's about ultimate restoration.
We're not just surviving.
We're thriving on a level we can barely imagine.
Okay, now my mind is blown. And then there's that line about seeing his face. Whoa, what does that even mean? Is it literal, or is it more about truly knowing God in a way we can't right now?
That's a question for each of us to grapple with. What would it mean for you to see God's face? What feels like it needs restoring in your life, in your very being?
Intense. But we can't forget, this isn't just some far-off dream. The text has this urgency to it.
It does, like when Jesus says, look, I am coming soon.
Right. There's this immediacy. It's not just a prediction.
It's a call to action, right now.
So this vision isn't meant to make us sit around and wait?
It's meant to change how we live today.
And it's an invitation, right? Not a threat. This free gift of the water of life is being offered. What would it mean to accept that, like right now, in this moment? How would that change things for us?
That's a question worth exploring.
It really is.
It would change a lot, I think. But accepting that gift also means, admitting we need it, that we're broken, that
Sure.
we need healing, both personally and as a whole world.
Yeah, that's a good point. We often get caught up in how beautiful and perfect this new reality is supposed to be. But then there's this whole judgment thing, too, the victorious and the not so victorious.
Right.
Makes you wonder, what does it even take to be considered victorious in this context?
That's where we wade into some pretty deep theological waters. Remember, Revelation was written at a time when early Christians were facing a lot of hardship.
Persecution, right?
Exactly. So it's a message of hope, for sure, but it's also got these warnings woven in, these pronouncements of judgment.
So is it about God punishing people for their sins? Or is there another way to understand it?
Many scholars see the judgment language as symbolic, not about God picking and choosing who's in or out, but more about the natural consequences of our choices.
Like if we choose to align ourselves with darkness, we experience the results of that.
Exactly. If we sow division, we reap division. It's not God punishing us, it's the inherent outcome.
Okay, I can see that, but it still feels kind of, I don't know, anxiety-inducing. Who gets into this new heaven and new earth? We talked about the Lamb's Book of Life, but who's deciding whose name is in there? Is it fate? Free will?
That, my friend, is a question that has been debated for centuries. Some theological views emphasize predestination. God's already chosen who's saved.
Oh, wow.
Others say free will is paramount, that our choices determine our eternal destiny.
Fate versus free will. It's a real head-scratcher.
It is. The Bible affirms both God's sovereignty and human responsibility. Hard to fully grasp how they work together.
I get that. Some things are just mysteries. But all this talk about judgment, eternity, it makes me wonder, are there people who are afraid of this new reality? If it's supposed to be so perfect, why would anyone fear it?
That is a fascinating paradox, isn't it? I think the fear comes from a few places. Some people, it's just fear of the unknown. This new reality is so different from what we experience now.
It's like trying to picture a color you've never seen before.
Exactly. It's beyond our comprehension, so it's unsettling. For others, it's maybe feeling unworthy. If this new heaven and new earth are for the pure and righteous, some might feel they don't measure up.
Yeah, like when you know you didn't study enough for a test, you dread seeing the results.
Right. And then there's the loss aspect. The text emphasizes no pain, no suffering. But it also suggests we lose things we value now. Relationships, possessions, our very identities.
I hadn't thought about that. So even if it's better, objectively, there's still a part of us that's attached to what's familiar. It's not just about being good enough. It's about what we might have to leave behind.
Exactly. Fear of the unknown, fear of judgment, fear of loss. Those are all human. But Revelation isn't meant to scare us. It's meant to inspire hope.
How do we balance those two, the fear and the hope?
I think it comes down to trust. Trusting that God's love is stronger than our fears, that His grace covers our imperfections, and that His plans for us are good, even if we don't see it yet.
I like that. It's like, yeah, we can be anxious, but we can also choose to focus on the promise, the love. Okay, but let's go back to that river of life for a second. You said it's full of symbolism. What's the deeper meaning there?
Like a lot of Revelation, the river and the tree, they have multiple layers. It evokes this feeling of paradise restored, a return to the Garden of Eden, but without the bad stuff, the sin and death.
Ah, okay.
The river represents this constant flow of God's grace and love nourishing us, and the tree, with its healing leaves, that points to the ultimate restoration we're offered through Christ.
So it's not just about living forever, it's about living well, being fully restored.
Yes, experiencing the fullness of life that was intended for us. But speaking of restoration, we keep talking about seeing God's face. Do you think that's literal? Will we actually see God?
That one's been bugging me too. I get all these images, some amazing, some kind of scary. What do you think?
Well, Revelation is open to different interpretations, as always. Some folks emphasize it literally, point to Old Testament stories where people encountered God visibly. But others say it's metaphorical, that seeing God's face is about perfect communion, understanding, complete union with the divine.
So it's not just our eyes, it's our hearts, our souls, experiencing intimacy with God on a whole other level.
Exactly. And that's a vision that's available to us now, too, not just in the future. We can get glimpses of it through prayer, meditation, acts of love. It's about a relationship that transforms us from the inside out.
Man, that's beautiful. We don't have to wait for heaven to experience a bit of it now. This whole conversation has been pretty heavy, though. Judgment, the end of the world, fear. It can be a bit much.
It's true. These aren't light topics. But remember, The heart of Revelation is hope. Even when things are dark and uncertain, God's still working. His love wins in the end.
So amidst the warnings and judgment, there's this constant undercurrent of grace and redemption.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this vision of a new heaven and new earth so powerful. It's not about escaping the world, it's about transforming it, starting with ourselves.
Embracing the idea that even when things are messy, God's love is still there.
Always. Okay, before we go too deep on transformation, I'm curious about something you mentioned earlier, the historical context of Revelation.
Ah, right. It's important to remember this was written for a specific group of people.
Early Christians who were going through a lot, so the judgment and victory language needs to be understood within that.
So it's not just random punishment. It's about good triumphing over evil, love over hate, truth over lies.
Exactly, a message of hope for those who are struggling. And that message speaks to anyone in any time who's facing challenges, who's wrestling with faith and doubt, who wants a better world.
Wow. So even though it comes from a specific time, it still has this timeless quality to it.
It does. Because the human experience, suffering, searching for meaning, wanting justice and peace, those are universal. They go beyond any one culture or time period.
That's a great point. But sometimes, honestly, it feels like the bad stuff is winning. Evil is on top. How do we square that with this whole idea of ultimate victory?
It's a tension we all live with. But I think it's about perspective. We focus on the immediate, the struggles we see around us.
The day-to-day stuff.
Right. But Revelation tells us to look at the bigger picture, the long view. It says, even when evil seems to be winning now, in the end, God's love is stronger.
So hold on to hope even when things are tough. Trust that God's working behind the scenes, even if we can't see it.
That's it. And that hope isn't passive either. It pushes us to be the change, to fight for justice, for peace, to be light in the darkness.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all connects. It's not about escaping the world, it's about transforming it. Recognizing that God's love is here now, in the middle of our messy lives, and that should inspire us to make a difference.
You got it. It's challenging, but so hopeful. Letting go of our fear, embracing the mystery of God's love, and living each day with purpose.
I love that. But before we get too lost in all this transformation talk, I'm still hung up on this Lamb's Book of Life business. We've talked judgment, free will, but what about predestination? Does God already know who's saved? Or do we have a real choice?
Ah, the age-old debate. Honestly, it's a mystery we may never fully solve on this side of eternity.
So what, we just got to accept that?
Maybe it's okay that we don't have all the answers. Maybe it's more about trusting in God's love and mercy, even if we don't understand everything.
So instead of stressing about who's in and who's out, we should focus on aligning ourselves with God's will, trusting He'll guide us.
Exactly. And that starts with a simple choice. Do we choose fear and isolation or love and connection? Do we hoard or share? Do we build walls or bridges?
Whoa, those are some big questions. It makes me realize the choices we make now don't just affect us. They're shaping the world around us, not just individual salvation, but collective transformation.
You got it. Our choices are all connected. They impact our families, communities, the whole world, really.
It's like we're each weaving our own threads into this huge tapestry.
I like that. And it reminds us that even small actions are important. Kindness, encouragement, trying to make things better. It all matters.
Okay, I'm feeling inspired. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to go back to that fear of the unknown thing. You said this new reality is so different it's hard to even imagine, but couldn't that also be exciting, like an adventure?
You're so right. Fear and excitement often go hand in hand. I think it's good to embrace both. It's normal to feel uneasy about the unknown, but God wants good things for us. He's not trying to scare us. He's inviting us into something way more amazing than we can comprehend.
So instead of being afraid of this new reality, we can choose to see it as an opportunity for growth, for discovery, for experiencing life in a whole new way.
Exactly. It's about trusting that even if we can't see the whole picture, God can. And He's leading us towards something beautiful, something that will satisfy all those deep longings in our hearts.
Okay, now I'm getting excited. I think it's time for a breather, though. Let all this sink in a bit. Okay, we're back. And wow, my brain is still buzzing from all that. We talked about fear and hope, judgment, and even got into some serious theological territory. But we've been focusing on this whole idea of a new reality, this new heaven and new earth. My question is, how does knowing about this actually change how we live now?
It's the question, isn't it? It's tempting to just get lost in the beauty of it all. But the real power of this vision is how it changes our lives today.
So it's not just a pie in the sky kind of promise.
No, not at all. It should be impacting the choices we make day in and day out.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me the practical application.
Well, for one thing, it changes our perspective. Knowing this world isn't all there is, that can be really freeing. We can let go of some of our anxieties, our attachments, a little easier.
It's like realizing you are stressing over a test that doesn't even count towards your grade.
Exactly. And according to this vision, what does matter is aligning ourselves with God's will, living out those values we talked about. Love, justice, mercy, knowing we're part of something much bigger.
So it's not about waiting for heaven, it's about bringing a little bit of heaven down to earth.
That's a great way to put it. And the exciting part is we're not just waiting for this future, we're actually helping to shape it. Our choices, our actions, they all contribute to the kind of world we're creating.
Wow, that's a big responsibility. Yeah. But looking around at the world today, the wars, the injustice, the environmental problems, it feels overwhelming. Like, how much can my little actions really change?
I get it, the problems are huge. But think about that image from Revelation. He will wipe away every tear. Even when we feel powerless, when things are tough, God is still at work.
So it's not about ignoring the bad stuff. It's about holding on to hope even when things seem hopeless.
That's it. And hope isn't passive. It's a force that pushes us to work for change. Think of the people who fought for civil rights, who worked to end poverty, who protect our planet. They were driven by a vision of a better world.
Okay, that gets me fired up. But let's bring it back down to earth for a sec. What does living with this new heaven and new earth mindset actually look like in our everyday lives? What can we actually do?
It starts small. Choosing kindness instead of judgment, forgiving instead of holding grudges, being generous, thinking about how our actions affect other people and the planet.
So it's not about the grand gestures, it's about the small, everyday acts of love.
Exactly. A smile to a stranger, helping someone out, trying to reduce what we consume. Those things might seem small, but when a lot of people do them, they add up.
I love that. Like, we're each planting little seeds of hope, and even if we don't see the full results right away, we're building something bigger.
That's a great way to think about it. It's not just about what happens when we die, but how we live right now. Our choices matter. Our actions matter. And we have the power to make a difference.
This whole deep dive has been an amazing journey. We've explored some big ideas, wrestled with tough questions, and I think come away with a better understanding of what this whole new heaven and new earth vision really means.
And isn't it encouraging? It's not about just waiting around. It's a call to action to help create a world where love and justice rule.
Absolutely. I think that's the perfect takeaway. Listener, we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas, read those excerpts from Revelation again, and see how this vision can shape your life and choices.
Remember, the future isn't fixed. We all have a part in building a world where tears are wiped away and love wins.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.